for joining us for today's Ipsos webinar illustrating the powerful consumer insights available with behavioral blueprinting. Today's presenters are senior behavioral scientists and consumer insights specialists, and you can read more about them on the slide in front of you. So now, without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce today's first speaker, Greg Gwiazda, Vice President in Ipsos's Behavioral Science Center of Excellence. Greg, you have the floor.
Excuse me, excellent. Thanks, Ellen. So yeah, again, welcome everyone. We really appreciate everyone taking the time to join us for the next 45 minutes, and we're excited to share out some of the cool things we think we're doing, and hopefully you find it interesting. Just wanted, before we kick off, want to say a little bit more about myself. Let Catherine introduce herself in a second. So as mentioned, I'm Greg Gwiazda. I'm a vice president in our Behavioral Science Center. I have been at Ipsos for about 15 years and have been formerly on the Behavioral Science Center team for about 3 years. But before my time at Ipsos, I was a professor of political psychology. So I've been really studying human behavior, decision making, how we process information for 20 plus years now. So I'm always excited to get to talk about these things, and I hope you enjoy our time together. And yeah, Catherine, if you want to introduce yourself, that would be great.
Hi everyone, I'm Catherine Grader, also a vice president in our Ipsos Behavioral Science Center team. I've worked in the market research industry for over 20 years now, and just before coming over to Ipsos, I worked client side at Kimberly-Clark, where I led the behavioral science initiative in our global central capabilities team, with the mission to enable cross-functional teams to learn and apply BSI principles across market research and also the overall marketing process, as we're talking about today.
Awesome. So yeah, we're super, I'm always excited when I get to work with Catherine. So yeah, so we have a lot to talk about over the next 40 minutes. And so just want to kind of give you a roadmap of what we'll do. So, first, I want to give you a little just bit more information about who, we are as the Ipsos Behavioral Science Center. And then want to move into a little bit about how Ipsos approaches behavioral science. It's a big concept and people think of it in different ways. And just want to let you know, how we attack it and how we see it has its value. After that, the sections 3 and 4, Catherine will take over, and she's going to, walk us through the challenge in the market that we think behavioral blueprinting, adds value to, that can address. And she'll talk about how we do this, and she'll give a brief walkthrough in terms of the science that underlies this, and give you a real sense of why we believe it. But then at the end, I'll show you some case studies. So not only why we believe it, but give you a taste of how it has actually worked. And so again, it should be a fun time together. And as mentioned, time permitting, we will answer questions if we're able to. All right, so let's get started. A little bit about us. So Behavioral Science Center was founded a couple of years ago, when Ipsos, a lot of people realized that, there is a lot of value in applying behavioral science to the application of marketing research and marketing research, processes. And we realized that, there's a lot of ways there's a huge information sort of database, this academic knowledge out there that is really valuable. And realized that we wanted to help people, bridge that gap between those academic learnings that are sometimes hard to understand, but we know are powerful. And so we developed a team with a lot of different specializations. And so you can see here a number of the people on our team, a number of people we work with. We have a number of PhD academics, a number of us who were former professors, and we have a mix as well as applied practitioners, with deep, like Catherine, client side experience. She stood in the shoes like many of you and tried to figure out, why are people behaving the way, or why aren't they behaving the way that we want? Our commitment goes deep. We have created separate think tanks, both with Yale and with Duke, to further make those academic application connections. And the Behavioral Science Center, here, the group of us on this team, we work across all of our service lines. So we get involved in primary research, ranging from qual to ethno to social to quant. But we also work sometimes more one-on-one with clients on those more consultative questions. As I mentioned, our overarching goal and sort of what's brought us together from the get-go is we want to translate those rigorous academic research into compelling and effective market activations. And I think, as we've been doing this for years, I think what we've come to learn is, everyone likes a behavioral science talk, and hopefully that's still true when you're at the end of this one. I think people understand that it's important, but they often find it difficult to know what to do with it once they leave. Like, oh, that was really cool, but how do I apply it? And so I think one thing that we've really taken to heart is we want to help our clients understand how, when rubber hits pavement, how do we make this and apply this? So we can help you address questions like, how can we create more engaging and impactful messaging? How can we optimize our packaging or our digital assets in a way that will more intuitively resonate on that non-conscious level? How can we create and reinforce habitual behavior that helps create that relevancy for our offers? Flat out, what are the non-conscious and hidden drivers of consumer behavior? And at the crux, how can we develop, sustain real and meaningful relationships, with our customers? So a little bit on our overall philosophy. And as I mentioned, we'd like to talk to you a little bit about how we apply behavioral science. So again, it's a big topic. There are a myriad of books written on this. You can literally get a PhD in it these days. And so it's not to say that there's one right definition, but I think it's only fair that you get a sense of how we're approaching this. So we see behavioral science as an interdisciplinary field, which allows us to better understand the contextual, non-conscious, and often those hidden drivers of behavior. We draw on a number of areas. We have people on our team with different levels of expertise. We work with cognitive psychology theories to understand how people process, store, and use information. We draw on social psychology to understand how people leverage emotions, how they build relationships, how they form and are influenced by their own and multiple self-identities. We draw on cultural anthropology to understand what are sort of the values and norms that are out there, the things that we expect to see. And lastly, behavioral economics, which I think a lot of people may think of as behavioral science, those biases and heuristics that we know that are at play through so much of our decisions. Loss aversion, decoy effects, status quo bias, and things like that. Sorry, I lost my mouse for a second. A core tenet of behavioral science is something, if you know nothing else about behavioral science, you surely know this. We come to the conclusion that, our decisions are guided by two different operating systems that work within the brain. There's that system one. If you are read Kahneman's Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow, there's the fast processor. It's intuitive, it's automatic, it's focused on sort of immediate gratification. It seeks efficiency. It's basically trying to get the good enough decision. It's the workhorse, and it's not a flaw of our brain. In fact, it's an incredibly powerful feature that is what enables us to get through our day-to-day lives, because there's so many decisions we have to make. And it usually gets it with a very high accuracy rate, but not a perfect rate. Then we have our system two processing. It's slow. It's when we need to deliberate. We're more controlled in our thinking. It seeks accuracy, and that's those moments where we need to get it not just pretty close to right. We have that belief we really want to get it right. So if you're thinking about what you want for lunch one day, you might go system one. The first thing that pops in your head may be good enough. If you're thinking about where to go for your anniversary dinner, you might put a little bit more thought into that and really think that through in terms of the overall experience. The other thing we think is important to account for is an understanding that decisions are a function of three factors. The first there in the middle, that knowledge and attitudes. What are the things that we believe and feel? We enter a decision with a certain set of information. And market research has done, I think, a fabulous job of creating tools to understand this. And so, for instance, if I'm thinking about what movie I want to pick, I go into that with a set of information. Like, there's certain genres I like. I like comedies. I'm not usually as into, maybe science fiction. There's also actors I like and actors that I don't like, and length of movies. And these are all things that affect my decision. But those alone don't determine it. A lot of things we want to account for. What are our goals and motivations? What mood am I in? Am I looking to unwind and I want some mindless action? Do I want to be challenged with maybe some sort of like indie, twist ending type movie? Do I want to be taken to a new world? And then the decision context. What situation do we find ourselves in? You know, I might have this desire maybe for an action movie, but it might turn out that my kids are watching with me, and I might go, well, maybe then we'll turn to, you know, to Star Wars or a Marvel movie. Whereas if it's just my wife and I, I'm like, oh no, maybe we throw on John Wick, which is maybe not quite as, you know, age appropriate for the little ones. What I want to talk a little bit more, what we're really going to focus on for the remaining time we have together, is the role that goals have. Because I think, you know, goals are something we think from the perspective of behavioral scientists haven't really been given, say, enough attention. Not that they haven't been given attention, but this is where we think there's a lot of opportunity to really extract a lot more value. Goals are immensely important as they give us focus. When consumer goals are active, we perceive and pay attention to the items in the environment that help us to achieve these goals. And it may even lead us to be blind to some of the elements that are not related to our current goal. So in short, you know, goals influence what we deem important as we make decisions. And as a result, we look for the things that are relevant to those things that are important. When we accomplish that, and then we satisfy that goal, when we sort of check the box, that is immensely satisfying. And if we can deliver products and offers and services that align with those goals, that positive feeling with our brand, with our offerings, are going to, you know, create a much stronger attachment, you know, with our customers. Another way to think about the role of goals in a far different way is this picture. You know, where's Waldo? I probably didn't even have to say where's Waldo. You probably have seen this picture before. You immediately kind of know the coloring, the design of this. And without me even saying where's Waldo, you almost certainly had the goal of finding Waldo within this image. Like, I bet everyone right away was looking for that red and white striped shirt. And so that goal became immediately there. It focused your attention. You probably also were completely oblivious, as I was, the myriad times I looked at this. There are probably a half a dozen people spilling drinks on their table onto other people and things like that. A fairly significant event in a picture, but something that just isn't related to our goal, therefore is out of our attention. It's therefore, you know, not important. And in case you're wondering, if you hadn't found him yet, Waldo is right up there to the left, you know, dry and safe. So where do goals come from? Well, broadly speaking, goals can be activated in two ways. There are factors that, you know, come from outside ourselves. And these could be tangible things, you know, the absence of something, running low, your gas light turns on while you're driving. You immediately become focused on the gas station signs on the side of the highway. Overt advertising or messaging might prime a goal and make that, you know, something that you're thinking more about. If you're buying a computer and you see the Apples Think Different, you might in fact realize, I want to think differently about what this role of computer is or what I want to buy. A flat out prompt in your environment, such as someone cleverly asking you to find Waldo, may direct you. But goals also can come from within, and they can be things like our physical needs. You know, if you're feeling hungry right now, you might think about, you know, what you have sitting around your desk. You might be already thinking about, you know, what's in your pantry down your kitchen. Emotional needs. If you're feeling lonely and you want to need to connect with others, you might be looking for opportunities. A neighbor that's outside, you might strike up a conversation with. You might go into social media to see who's around. And then the last one is, there are these innate ways in which we process and respond to information, almost to a degree our values, a sense of how we see ourselves, in the sense of which the way we believe we carry ourselves in the world. And these are these chronic latent motivations that we have that often affect us, not only within us, but sometimes a little bit without our awareness. But they are things that we can pick up on. And this is sort of the crux of what we want to talk about with this behavioral blueprinting. And on that note, I would like to turn it over to Catherine so that she can take us through, you know, this topic. Let's take it away, Catherine.
Yeah, so thanks. Now that Greg has explained more about the building blocks of behavioral science, let's turn to thinking a little bit more about the macro context of traditional marketing research. There's, of course, a ton that we can glean from traditional research, but it's not without its challenges. As we all know, understanding your target audience's goals and motivations, so really getting under the hood on what they're specifically trying to achieve, is absolutely critical if you're going to truly understand why they do what they do. And it's also critical if you have any hope of designing messaging, products, and services that aim to capture their attention and help them satisfy achievement of their goals, as Greg just talked about. But I think we can all also agree that it's not necessarily always as easy as it sounds to identify what consumers' underlying motivations are to achieve goals, as well as their approaches and mindsets and processes involved in goal achievement. Therefore, I think it's worth it to talk for a couple minutes about commonly voiced challenges that tend to surface when we think about understanding consumer motivations with traditional market research studies. So as an example, an often voiced frustration is that consumer segmentations can be sometimes difficult to activate against, or maybe not as inspirational as they could be to the development process when you're trying to create things like claims, names, communication, elements, concepts, packaging. And as a result, often there's work to be done then to sort of illuminate the segments that you identify as your key prime prospects, which can often require lots of additional money and time, and sometimes still not really seem to address the need. You can still sort of have that nagging feeling that just like maybe you're missing something that bridges the explicit category attitudes and stated behavior that you got from your segmentation to consumers' underlying motivations and the ways in which they tend to process information, which you really don't get from something like a traditional segmentation. So more of the how to talk to them and the what to say than who they are and what they're doing. And then another frustrating scenario that researchers and their cross-functional team partners tend to run into is that when they field quant surveys that attempt to reveal winning options, so it could be the claims that rise to the top in like a max diff, the concept or piece of creative that gets the best score in testing, the packaging design with the highest PI or things like that. They might find the winners, but find that these traditional metrics that they are looking at in testing do struggle to provide a deeper understanding of why the winners were the winners, why the losers were the losers. And asking consumers directly why certain things resonated with them while others didn't can be really somewhat helpful at best, because we know people often can't articulate the real whys behind their preferences. But luckily, knowing more about the well-studied and validated components of motivation and goal achievement can address these challenges that we talked about and more, and help unstick us from the rut of asking the same questions over and over and getting similar answers again and again. For anyone who has worked on a category or a brand for a long time, I'm very familiar with this scenario, and you probably are too, where you feel like you keep staring kind of at the same information and trying to find a different answer from it, or trying to crack the same nut over and over. It possibly could be just the way that you're looking at it or the way that you haven't looked at it yet. Academic frameworks like the ones that you see here, so regulatory fit theory, locus of control, intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation, maximizing versus satisficing, they help us really put structure around the ways in which people non-consciously view the world, as well as themselves, how they approach a certain category, how they gather information, and ultimately how they make decisions. And on our team, we've drawn from this literature to create actually a really simple way to harness the power of this massive body of research that's out there and apply it to our clients' business questions. And that's what we're calling behavioral blueprinting. Ultimately, once you understand these things about your motivations of your target consumer, you can of course then better develop and align your interventions that you're developing to their unique mindset and ensure that they're more likely to not only give focus to your message, so when they're looking for the red and white stripes, they're actually seeing them, but that they're more likely to see how it relates to achievement of their specific goal, remember it, and then of course act on it, which is where the rubber really meets the road. And along the way, another benefit is this added layer of knowledge about your consumer and what will resonate with them can also be immensely helpful in adding tactical direction to something like your briefing process, which can be a little bit squishy and ambiguous, and also adds focus to testing of various executional elements of your brand strategy, like claims, names, iconography, the user experience, and just multiple things within the overall concept development process. And I know in my experience on the client side, as I talked about earlier, when we would hear words like academic literature and frameworks and principles, many people would automatically think complicated, theoretical, expensive, time-consuming, all not great words when you're thinking about proposing your research plan. But the beauty of blueprinting, aside from its actionability, which we talked about, is that it's actually easy, it's accessible, it's scalable, and it's flexible. We've already done the work on our side of the distillation of all of the knowledge and the academic literature. So at this point, we just need about 5 to 7-ish minutes or so of survey real estate, either added onto another survey that you're already doing, like usage and attitudes, segmentation, or concept testing, or we can field it as a standalone battery of questions. And in that example, we can actually even take an existing segmentation that you already have and map these frameworks back to your segments after the fact now using your typing tool. And the beauty in the design of blueprinting also lies in the fact that the science is impactful, but it's also intuitive. When you learn more about it, you'll discover, I think, that it just seems to make sense. And you'll also start to encounter, the more you know about it, messaging and other touch points in your own life that you just see in the world, where you'll start to see these ties back to different motivational framework alignment. We unfortunately don't have the time today. We could talk all afternoon about different motivational frameworks, but we just have a little bit of time with you. So we'll look at 2 in more detail: regulatory fit theory and also locus of control. But first, let's consider a completely hypothetical case study. So I'll add the legal caveat that any similarity to actually real people is purely coincidental, but let's say we're thinking about a consumer and we'll call him Greg. So you can see here, we know quite a bit about his basic information. We know his age, his occupation, and we know about his hobby, that he's a craft beer explorer. If you ask Greg about his passion for craft beer, he'll tell you that he craves variety and exploration. He's constantly trying new breweries, and overall, he finds a lot of enjoyment from his hobby. And his online behavior backs this up. He seems to have explored a lot of beers. But there's something interesting if we dive a little deeper about how Greg approaches his hobby. So we find more out about how he approaches it and learn that he always does very extensive research on beer ratings before ordering. And why does he do this? Well, digging into below the surface of his behavior, he doesn't want to inadvertently get the wrong beer and then regret it. So how do we think about all this in terms of Greg's goals, motivations, and mindsets when it comes to his hobby of exploring craft beers? We can think about his mindset in terms of prevention focused or promotion focused, which is the basis of regulatory fit theory. So we might assume he relates to his craft beer passion in a very promotion oriented way, since we know that he likes to explore, find good beers, check out new breweries, and a promotion mindset is all about the desire for success, what can be gained, achieved, and maximized, asking all those questions that you see there on the right side. But as we learned, there's a very clear prevention element to his approach because before going to a microbrewery, he researches what's best, and that's due to a fear of ordering the wrong thing and then regretting it later. So he strongly wants to avoid or prevent that experience. And prevention mindset is all about a fear of failure, a sense of obligation and responsibility, maintenance, and protection. So why is this important? Why is this all this somewhat academic-y sounding theory meaningful for messaging? And I'm going to read this slide verbatim because it's really important. To optimize consumer touchpoints and drive desired behaviors, there needs to be a match in terms of consumers' mindsets and the prevention versus promotion focus of the message. So basically, this mindset to message alignment creates regulatory fit, which is essentially an ease of processing that just kind of feels right. So as a consumer, you've probably had this feeling before where you just sense that the company is kind of speaking your language, and it creates a sense that the product is the right choice for you. This general positive feeling that you have then spreads to improve overall evaluations of the entire product and service. And this notion that good regulatory fit equals increased engagement has been proven time and again to hold true. Here's a brief summary of one example about toothpaste. In this study, respondents saw one of 2 statements about Crest versus Colgate. One had more of a promotion frame for Crest, so Crest is better than Colgate, its competitor, and the other one had a prevention frame, Colgate is worse than Crest. And as you can see in the data on the right, promotion-oriented respondents rated the positively framed claim higher, while prevention-oriented respondents did the opposite. They rated the negatively framed claim higher. So proving out that the message that fit their orientation was more preferred. We can also see how regulatory fit might play out in real-world communication. Well, some products, it's one thing to note that they do fundamentally lean one way or the other. They might lean promotion or prevention at a more macro category level. The majority of products are more in a space where they can alter the positioning a bit and the framing of the product. So the same product can be framed to align with either prevention or promotion focused consumers. And here's one example. So toothpaste can be positioned as a promotion product by focusing on the benefits of providing whiter teeth, like the ad on the left does, or it can also be positioned as a prevention product by describing the benefits as being able to reduce plaque, like the ad on the right. So it's what you're getting versus what you're removing, what you're trying to avoid, what you're fearful of. Same product, just a different mindset and different way to present it. And here we have Febreeze. So on the left, leaning more into gaining happiness and enjoyment versus on the right, avoiding having your passengers thinking that your car smells and possibly never wanting to ride with you again. And there are many examples of this in the food and beverage and restaurant industry. There is on one side the idea of indulgence and maximizing the experience of enjoying food and therefore enjoying life. And then there's definitely the very real aspect of enjoyment, but with obligation, responsibility, health preservation, and wealth management. And in all of these examples, rather than kind of a one size fits all or a right and a wrong, or it's always one thing or there's another thing, there's merely a different way to look at it through underlying motivation and good regulatory fit. And then let's dive into the other motivation-based framework that we'll go through today that we often leverage in behavioral science as well, Locus of Control. This model describes how people differ in the extent to which they feel they have agency over the outcome of their lives. People with an external locus generally feel that what happens to them is caused by external factors that are largely beyond their control. So it could be things that are happening in their environment or context, a product or service, another person, even genetics, and therefore for them, something external is also perceived to be the solution to the problem. And then given that, their emotional state may be one of hesitancy, nervousness, hopelessness, and what they're looking for ultimately is relief from those feelings. But then conversely, people with an internal locus generally feel that what happens to them is their own doing, and therefore they're looking for tools to empower them. They perceive their own actions to kind of be the answer, not something external from themselves. They may feel calm, capable, and feel pride for successes, but also shame and guilt for failures because, again, they believe that they're in control and what happens to them is ultimately under their own control. And like our regulatory fit example, whether your locus of control is predominantly external or internal matters. It influences what type of messaging you're more apt to find influential. So in this study, women received messaging urging them to get a mammogram. It was the same desired behavior, but there was a more externally focused message. And you can see here, it's the best thing medical science has to offer for your health, mammography. The tagline was, the responsibility for maintaining your good health resides in your partnership with your healthcare provider. And then there was an internally focused message that some women got. The best thing you can do for your health is mammography. The tagline is, the responsibility for maintaining your good health belongs to you. So a very different way to kind of frame what ultimately is the same action. And at this point, you can probably guess what the results were, but for the call to action of actually scheduling and getting a mammogram, women with an external locus of control, that's just kind of a trait that they have, they were more likely to be influenced by the CTA if they received an aligned message, and vice versa with the women with an internal locus of control. If they received the internal locus of control messaging, that was more influential, and they had a higher percentage reporting getting a mammogram 12 months later in the follow-up. And then we can also see real life examples of locus of control. Once we look, again, this is one of those things that when you start looking at the world around you, you'll be like, oh, I can kind of see what they're going for here. So here's one example. These are two different ads within the same category, this general category of weight loss, weight management. One is Nutrisystem and one is Weight Watchers. And one, the Nutrisystem one, is leaning into taking the responsibility of weight management kind of out of your hands. So you just have to open the box, eat the food we give you, and you lose the weight. But the other one, the Weight Watchers example, touts their apps and tools that allow you to be in control of what you eat and what weight you lose anytime, anywhere. Same general category, but pretty different approach. Turning to cars, we see messages that appear to be geared also towards external versus internal focus. So the Volvo ad on the left highlights the unpredictability of driving. You can't control what others do. You can't control really what happens around you, such as cyclists who seem to come out of nowhere and come right in front of your car. But your car does notice this for you, and it will solve the problem for you. Almost you don't even have to do anything. And then on the other hand, Toyota is saying that things seemingly happen around you, like a massive snowstorm, but that doesn't change your personal ability to break out of winter. So other people might accept that their cars are buried in the snow or boxed in, but that's not you because you're in control of what happens. These messages for deodorant show the women in the ads in totally different lights. In the first, in the external locus, she seems like someone who life is sort of happening to, someone looking for something or someone to come in and save her from this terrible and embarrassing situation that she seems to be in. But the second on the right shows someone in control who's empowered and in charge. So it's a completely different in message and tone and likely to resonate very differently to consumers who feel different senses of agency over their own lives. And then lastly, let's move into the world of financial planning. So a little bit different, shifting gears again to see how motivations and mindsets could be reflected now, not in a still ad or print ad, but in a video ad. We'll show two 30-second spots, each coming from a slightly different angle. And as you're watching these ads, I'd ask you to think about what you just learned about regulatory fit and locus of control, and think about what do you see that seems to be translating some of those key aspects of the two frameworks into this type of creative. Right, so you might have even in watching those thought that one of them kind of spoke to you a little bit better, a little bit more clearly, and was a little bit more influential for you personally than the other one. And motivation in this case wasn't about the product or the behavior. That was exactly the same in both ads, but the relevance differs because each one is focused towards slightly different mindsets. So how should this service be positioned, or which of these ads is better than the other one? Well, that's sort of a trick question, because the answer is basically we're missing a key piece of the puzzle without a better understanding of the motivations and mindsets of whoever their target audience specifically was. Now, of course, we could do testing on these ads to see whether the actual creative elements and branding could be optimized, or there are certain frames that might be better than others. But in terms of the essence of the creative idea behind these spots, understanding the target audience's mindset and approach to financial planning overall, and even their approach to life overall, would help us determine messaging and maximize impact of the creative spend. So if we think about these two ads, and in the first video, that ad was really tapping into more of a prevention mindset. That person was worried about making mistakes. They were worried about getting things wrong. They'd done all sorts of research to kind of protect themselves with this fear of failure. And then also TD Ameritrade was positioned as the solution. They said things like, we'll check your strategy, we'll do that work for you, appealing more to that external locus of control. And then on the flip side, in video 2, we're seeing more of that promotion framing. After using TD Ameritrade, you get empowered, bigger, buffer, you've added to your abilities, just think of all you can do and achieve. And also you are positioned as the ultimate solution in that one. We will train you to become a smarter, stronger investor. You've got this, you can do it yourself. Definitely more of an internal locus. So we can see how motivation frameworks play out in in-market messaging, but we also actually have real case studies where our clients have already used behavioral blueprinting to make decisions and impact their businesses. And Greg will share a few of these with you in the minutes we have left.
Yeah, thank you. I can also don't want to extrapolate too far from the data, but I think that hypothetical Greg would also have been much more responsive to the prevention TD Ameritrade ad. That just, I'm guessing it speaks to him. So yeah, so I said, like, it really is interesting. And I said, like, you know, we've done some academic work, and as Catherine mentioned, you're probably going to see a lot of this, you know, out and about, you know, in the world around you now that you've, you know, been exposed to it. But we've also applied this in a number of studies, and just want to give some high level, you know, thinking. The typical place, and not the only place we've done this a lot, is, you know, overlaying with segments or with targets. And a lot of times, Catherine mentioned, it's that activation, it's this building of those personas, it's that deeper understanding. And so one interesting study we did was, you know, we helped a client try to get a deeper understanding of physician segments, you know, to create more engaging messaging. And in this case, they were trying to refresh. They were doing a segmentation refresh, and they wanted to understand how physicians, you know, saw the relationship vis-a-vis treatments as well as their patients. And in this case, we found, you know, the same approaches that Catherine mentioned, that regulatory focus theory and locus of control really helped us, you know, tell a stronger story and really begin to understand how to connect with those physicians. So, for example, we have segment A here, who is high on prevention with an external locus, and realizing that the sort of solutions that our client offered needs to describe how this treatment is going to solve the problem, you know, for the physician. You know, there were some physicians who, they are likewise busy with a lot of things. It's not that they're not smart, but there are times where they're like, I just need something to work. And also looking for some of these conditions, saying, I don't want things to come back in the future, you know, from the patient, a relapse. And so, you know, I want a solution that helps me in that way. Where there were other physicians, again, just a different approach to the treatments and to their careers, is they very much believed that they were in control, that they were the ones who were going to manage this this treatment. They were the ones who were going to manage this condition, that they could solve this. And therefore, they also had this promotion, I shouldn't say therefore, but in this case, they did also have this promotion mindset where they wanted to help their patients achieve more. They wanted to do more with them as themselves as a practice. And so it became a really powerful way to bring the communication and to see the relevancy of those offers. But they would co with their sales teams in different ways. In another consumer segmentation we did, we helped a client who was, again, as Catherine mentioned, sort of struggling to activate. And they had a sense of having a good segmentation. It had been for a while. They had one of those ubiquitous problems, that one segment that was scoring high on everything. And they believed it was a real segment, but they weren't entirely sure. And they were saying, you know, but we haven't been able to quite tease out the story on how to get this group there. And, you know, we talked to them a little bit, and, you know, they said, you know, and if it's not a real segment, you know, let us know. We said, well, we think it could be. A lot of what you're saying really resonates with the city. They might have a promotion orientation. These are people who are seeking to enrich. These are people who are going to be very open to a number of things. And so let us maybe overlay this regulatory fit theory. And in this case, we also looked at intrinsic and extrinsic motivations. And let's look at, you know, does this help us tease out those motivations that helps us really see, you know, what's getting at that. And again, what we saw was really nicely that it began to do that. That segment, in fact, scored high on that promotion orientation, not prevention. And they were very intrinsically motivated. This is a retail segmentation. So they really wanted to enjoy the retail experience itself. You know, we saw other segments like this that were, again, promotion oriented, but were still more extrinsically motivated by things like price, a sense of obligation of having to do the shopping, you know, and things like that. And what we also layered into this study, because by having these behavioral science, you know, anchors, we said, let's do some more diagnostics. And so we looked at sort of the benefits, you know, that were intrinsic and extrinsic. And at just a high level here, what we saw was just kind of reinforcing that if you want to build end caps, if you want to build demonstrations and things like that, you know, you are looking for not necessarily things that are going to facilitate grab and go shopping or things that are going to talk about quick and easy cooking. You want to do things that make it fun, enjoyable, interesting. And it really was a way for them to target their in-store promotions, their flyers and things like that in a way that resonated. And then the final, I realized I was going really quick on this one, I would right at time. We did a really cool study on the appeal of electric cars and hybrids. And they wanted to understand the mass market of these electric cars. And the conventional wisdom here is that people buy electric cars, to reduce their carbon footprint, and from a prevention mindset. And that 100% is true of the majority of people. But we found a small but sizable group of the population had a more promotion orientation towards hybrids. And what was also interesting is that these groups then, it wasn't just from a positioning. They wanted different product benefits. They had different characteristics. Those prevention folks wanted traditional engines. They owned their cars. They were older. And so they were looking like, basically, give me the same with longer driving range. Whereas the promotion folks were like, I want something cooler. I want a turbocharged engine. They leased their vehicles, more variety seeking. They were younger and single, and they were saying, yeah, they wanted to do well for the environment, to be clear. But things that they were also saying that were motivating them: advance my status, kind of make me look cool, show me the new technology. And so it not only affected the positioning of what they went to market, but realized the type of cars that you would go there are going to appeal. It's not just how you position it. This is a case for feeding your innovation pipeline. So as we wrap this up, I just want to sort of leave you with 3 key thoughts. Thrown a lot of information at you, and hopefully, you've enjoyed this as much as we have. But first, outcomes and goals absolutely matter, those benefits that people want. But we also want to realize that processes matter as much, if not more. How people achieve their goals is equally important to whether they actually seek to go out and do it. Think about the weight loss. If you're someone with external locus and you're given an internal locus solution, you're not necessarily going to action on that. And this can really help mitigate that say-do gap that we often see. The cool thing about this is, we know how to relatively easily assess these consumer latent motivations. Yes, they are latent, but they are measurable. We can, tap into this. And then third is, when you align those goals and those latent motivations, you unlock a number of pathways to a better behavioral understanding. You doing this, you'll create a more meaningful connection in the market and be more likely to guide consumer behavior. If you weren't able to submit your question, by all means, reach out to Catherine or myself directly. Hopefully another thing that was clear from this, we love to talk about this. We like, solving these problems. We would love to, hear what's going on in your world. So with that, let me say thank you on behalf of Catherine and myself, and hope you have a nice finish to the rest of your week.
Thank you, everyone.